Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and it is our weekly roundup of some of the stories that have been making headlines here in northern Michigan as we talk with the journalists that are covering those stories. And joining me this week from the Petoskey News Review, Craig Currier. Welcome back, Craig. Good to see you.
Thank you, Bill. I'm glad to be here.
I appreciate you making the drive, especially. I know it's all for you guys. Good to have you in. Last time you were here, we were talking primary elections, and now we are at the tail end of September here. Already obviously looking kind of full steam ahead to what's coming up in November. But kind of bring us up to speed in what has happened in the week since the primary. One of the big races up in your area was the surprise, Lee Chatfield unseating incumbent Frank Foster.
Well, and Bill, the interesting thing about that race, in the days leading up to it, it almost became a foregone conclusion that Lee Chatfield was going to pass on by Frank Foster. And Frank Foster made the comment to me that he looked at past years and thought, if I get to 5,000 votes in this district, I'll win. And just looking at voter turnout, and but he did. He got over 5,000 votes, and Lee Chatfield got over 6,000. So it goes to show you that, especially in a primary, all you got to do is energize your voting base, and chances are, turnout was just abysmal, and you can win that way. So,
yeah. I guess, have you talked to him since the primary?
To Foster?
To Frank Foster?
Yeah. Frank said the day after he lost, he said one of the things that he still wanted to get done was an amendment to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, the state Civil Rights Act. One of the things he pushed about a year ago, he became the first Republican to come out and say, it's time that Michigan as a state stop discriminating or prohibit discrimination against lesbians and gays, discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Mm-hmm. And Frank took a lot of criticism for this when he came out in support of this, but he said something Michigan needs to do to compete with other states that have long ago or several years ago adopted such a measure. But it's gone nowhere. A bill was introduced by a couple Democratic lawmakers in Lansing, but Republican leadership has said we're not going to take that up. It doesn't include some sort of provision based on religious liberties. No, they want to include some sort of language that allows you to say, well, my religious beliefs prevent me or force me to this infringes upon my religious beliefs.
This kind of goes back to, what was it, the California and the cake baker who didn't want to make the cake for the gay couple having a wedding, that type of thing.
Yeah. So there is a bill, but it's not. Frank's not involved in it. It's all on the Democratic side. From what I've been following, House Speaker Jace Bolger says it's not going to come up for a vote until there are those protections for people based on their religious beliefs. And I don't know what happens from here. They're just kind of crawling up to this issue. And
well, it's up to the Republicans really to advance it, and in a way, Frank Foster is a lame duck for the rest of the year too.
Which would give him every reason that he could just go out there and push this. But I know, I know that the legislature is bigger than one man, and I think Frank Foster probably, even if he wants to do that, can't push it without support from leadership. So.
Yeah, it like you said, it just goes to show that just because you want to get something done doesn't mean it's going to happen in Lansing, that's for sure. Governor, weighing in on this, kind of?
Sure. Well, no, he's on the record. I think it was back in May at the Mackinac Policy Conference where he said it's time. This was really what gave the whole thing credence, that you thought maybe this is going to happen. And Governor said it's time for us to approach this in the legislature in Lansing. And his exact quote was, "I want to see this discussion." I shouldn't say exact quote, paraphrasing his quote, but the language he used was, "I want to see this discussion in the legislature." And he wouldn't, pressed by reporters, he wouldn't say, I want to see this passed. I don't know if it's time yet. There was no sort of commitment along those lines. And, that's kind of the attitude that's been adopted by the legislature. You have everybody's, like I said, just kind of walking up to the issue, and they're not tackling it. It doesn't look like it's going to happen before the end of the year, and we'll see what happens with it.
That's really the easy way out for any topic whatsoever, isn't it? To say I wanted to see the legislature discuss something. Isn't that their job to?
Here's how I think about it: is that even if, no matter what side of the issue you stand on, you've got to be able to appreciate the political posturing, the gamesmanship that's going on in this, because it's about as good as it gets when they come up to an issue like this so soft
and say, I want to discuss it. Gosh darn it, we should have a discussion. That's for sure. Well, good. You've also got, we've got the state Senate race, Wayne Schmidt taking on another Schmidt, isn't it?
No, we actually, as an aside, it was Jimmy Schmidt who faced Phil Belfie in the Democratic side of the.
We avoided the Schmidt race,
and probably for the best, because as it was pointed out yesterday too, as Jimmy Schmidt is back in custody on a alleged parole violation, and
oh, you're kidding.
We haven't gone into it any more than that, and I don't know that we will, but you can check his records up on the state corrections website, and he's in custody as of September 10th. So I don't know what happened. Don't know if he did anything, but voters went just barely in another direction, and probably for the best.
All right, so we've got Phil Belfie and Wayne Schmidt.
Wayne Schmidt, yes.
It's still, it's September. It's still a little early, but you've got to think that they'll start making some noise here any day now.
It has been really quiet since the primary, and that's the election cycle. But you can't help but feel like a lot of these races were decided in the primary. And I know, I'm a 6-month-old reporter here, but that's the way that the history's been in these districts. Wayne's race with Greg, I think, you just look at the financial numbers in it. Wayne, even up to the very, very last day of the campaign, the August 5th primary, Wayne was just firing away. He spent about $400,000 in the whole in that whole primary campaign to Greg's 60 or so that he was able to raise. But Wayne's starting off fresh, and that I'm sure he can just reload. There's money, there's plenty of money available to these candidates. But that tells you a lot about the race. He spent almost 7-1. He almost outspent Greg McMaster to win that race. And
have you talked to Greg since the primary?
Greg was rumored to be considering a write-in campaign. I don't know if you caught that. That was kind of the rumor. He squashed that finally. Said that, and he was asked, "Will you support Wayne? Are you endorsing Wayne now? Is that what Is that what your next step is?" And he wouldn't go that far, but said that he knew it was could potentially damage the party in that seat if he were to take votes away as a write-in candidate.
Okay. So what are Wayne's issues moving forward? We've talked to him at length about road funding, about education. Obviously, the canned answer from everyone in Lansing now is jobs is issue number one, which frankly in my mind just kind of falls on deaf ears. Yeah, we know it. Jobs are number one, so really what's number two? Let's get down to it.
Well, Wayne is chairman of the House Transportation Committee. He's the one pushing bills that would go to fix potholes, go to repave roads. And, judging by his comments over the last several weeks, we're not looking at anything coming through before the end of the year. It sounds like, they just, both sides can't agree. Both sides being, even within the Republican Party, can't agree on whether, we need more taxes, whether, a scaled down version of increasing taxes with also reshuffling money and reallocating money from other budgets. You talk to, up in our area, the 4 or 5 legislators that we talk to regularly, they each have a different feeling for how this is going to go, for what the eventual solution will include. So your guess is as good as mine. I mean, there's the studies out there that show the public's willing to pay more in taxes for them, but there are people who say the money exists and we just gotta shift it around. So
the truth is probably a little of both.
Yeah.
As is the case with most things, it seems. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm surprised that we're not taking some action on roads. You would think that could be a hot button issue enough so to the point that you could really rally some voters ahead of the election to say, I am taking some action on roads. This is our time.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, these guys are talking about they're not going to do it before the election in November. Well, isn't that a reason to vote against them then? Well, this is the top priority apparently, or according to, you talk to the legislatures, they say they know it's the top priority. Talk to the voters, they say top priority for them. Where's the disconnect? I mean, where's the solution in there? Apparently that we can't get to one.
Education, the other big one during the campaign season. Those are the big three: jobs, roads, and education. Anything happening? Any buzz? I mean, we've been talking for years about a little equity in school funding, and I guess we're inching in that direction very slowly. But what's left? What's next?
Well, I think it was 20 years ago that Proposal A sought to right this wrong in the disparity in per pupil funding for one area versus the other. And I know up in our coverage area, we get it all. It's a hot topic. Why are schools down, in suburban Detroit getting however much per student, and we're getting several $100s less per student? Howard Walker, who's the state senator now, not running for re-election, has actually done a little bit of explanation on this topic, and really it's somewhere in between that. There's money that is raised locally or generated locally that has to go back to that particular district that it came from. So you're going to, according to what Howard Walker has told us, I mean, you're going to see that disparity to an extent, but not to the extent that we're seeing it now. And that's the frustration, I think, with Proposal A, is this is 20 years ago that this was passed, and we're still seeing the issues 2 decades later.
Any further, it's kind of a silly question, any further reaction from school districts up north? I mean, there's always reaction, and then there's no reaction because there's really not a lot changing. But are school districts still being vocal about their concerns?
Well, I guess on that end, and maybe you can enlighten me about down here, but when you've got the really small school districts, they're the ones who are, I mean, you won't hear about them because they're so small, but they're the ones where the principal or the superintendent is also the principal of the whole K through 12 system, and they might have 200 students. It's a really small school, but he or she is fulfilling huge roles there and taking on huge responsibilities and answering to parents on so many different levels. And the numbers are there for what they're making, but they're not making any more than some of the others in larger districts. And there are also incentives for those small school districts to shut down, to close their doors and combine with others, and and pool funds that way. And that's a tough thing to do, because I know, again, I don't know if there's a lot of small school districts around, the outer Traverse City area here, but you've got your community where families have grown up. They've probably got generations and generations. They've gone to, their kids have gone to school, grandkids have gone to these schools, and now you're saying, now you're going to go. We're going to shut the doors
10
here.
miles
and you're going,
down the road.
Exactly. You're 30-minute bus ride in the morning up to something. So it's tough for these communities to kind of adopt. Instead, they seem to want to just keep paring budgets down until the bare minimum.
I'm at the point, I think, where I'm going to start asking school districts. We'll probably start asking parents and listeners on the radio program about what really is important to you in the schools. It's going to sound blasphemous I know, to say, are athletics a core function of your schools? Is bus transportation a core function of your school? Mm-hmm. Is the school lunch a core function of your school? I mean, all these things are things that cost money. Transportation, bus transportation especially, and especially if you're talking about shutting down a school and sending them somewhere else, maybe that becomes more important. But for your neighborhood schools, how much do we need to spend on busing? And is that where you want your money to go, or do you want it to go in the classroom?
Well, I go back to the first thing you said there, athletics, and it's not just at public school level. I mean, I've heard the discussion at smaller colleges, Division III colleges. Mm-hmm. I'm a sports fan, so I'm one who says there are so many rewards to athletic competition, to teams, whether it's varsity, junior varsity, freshman, club level, whatever it might be. I got a lot out of it. You as someone who's covered the games, covered the teams, you see, the unity, the camaraderie that kids get from it. You know, it's just I would say it's a core function of schools. So I know you've got people on the other side of the issue, and that is a debate. What do you do about this? And then you're talking about transportation. Well, yeah, you got to take the kids on Saturdays to games, or after school to games, and that's adding up throughout the year when you consider how many teams across the board, boys and girls. But yes, I mean, I think that's at what point do you do you start cutting those programs?
And frankly, I don't disagree. I'm going to sound like Governor Snyder here, but I think it's time for a discussion about what do we prioritize. Do we need the newest improvements to the football field? Do we need the brand new, shiny uniforms every season? Where can we cut something? And it goes across to all extracurriculars too. I'm not just picking on athletics, but do we need the shiny band instruments every year? And I know that's not necessarily the case, but just as an example.
And before people start saying that's what we ought to be doing, a lot of fundraising goes on to get those things like the uniforms, or you mentioned band or drama. I mean, drama needs a set to be built, and I'm sure they either work on it themselves or there's money donated to help acquire the necessary materials. So it's not a blanket thing where you can just say let's cut this program and then X amount of dollars will be saved.
Right. No, I think you're right. I just think it seems like we spend an awful lot of time talking about the problem, that there is one, and not enough time talking about what we really could do about it. That's just my soapbox. Yeah. But anyway, lots of stuff. Looking ahead to November now, we're back to elections here for a minute. What does the Petoskey News Review have in store for candidates' issues as we get closer to Election Day?
Well, we're trying a little bit. I mean, we're trying to adapt all the time and get new stuff, new content up for people to look at. And you've had my boss, my editor, Jeremy McBain, on here talking about his theories, plans that he's come up with, and really I'm just following his lead. But
because they're all excellent theories.
Yeah,
amazing ideas.
He's the first to admit that some have worked and others have not. But no, he's pushing you've got, on the one hand, you've got your print product, and on the other hand, you've got your digital product, and the readers will overlap sometimes, but certainly a lot of them do not. And so what we're trying to do is create something on the digital side that is unique and interesting to people who see us that way, and then transform or do something entirely different in print. So we're experimenting with video and audio stuff on our website. Still got, I think it's less than 50 days now, but almost 2 months till the election, and so we'll be putting up some different stuff here, hopefully within the next couple weeks.
So we'll maybe hear from some of the candidates you were saying?
Sure. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We're trying to make video that's relevant to voters and also short enough that they want to listen to it, but long enough that they'll get something from it, and that's the real real juggle is where is that sweet spot. But yeah, we'll have stuff up there from each one of the candidates in each one of the elections in the coverage area for the Petoskey News Review, Charlevoix Courier, Gaylord Herald Times. So we're hoping that people, there's no excuse. I mean, you can be informed if you want to. So
yeah, well, that's great. In the closing minutes, I wanted to mention the honor flight that we took to Washington, D.C. yesterday, and we've got plenty of Northern Michigan connections to that. But we were with a group of 51 veterans, mostly World War II veterans, from primarily the Grand Traverse region. We had a couple from Flint and Grand Rapids, and it's a all expense paid one-day trip to take the veterans to some of our national memorials and the Washington Monument, and just see some of the memorials dedicated in their honor.
Who was it through? What was the organization?
It's called the Mid-Michigan Honor Flight.
Okay.
They're based in Mecosta County, and this is their first flight from Traverse City.
Wow.
So it took 51 veterans and a couple media folks along to help spread the word, but it's all done through donation. And if family calls and says, Dad was a World War II veteran, we want him to go see the World War II Memorial, to add him to the list, and whenever they get a full plane, they'll put a trip together and give those guys an opportunity to see those memorials.
Sure. So what was the day like? You guys, what time in the morning did you guys get up, and where'd you go?
We left Traverse City at 8 o'clock in the morning, and just a huge gathering there in the terminal at Cherry Capital of all the guys getting ready. The Coast Guard, members of the Coast Guard had lined the terminal on both sides with flags, and so we had a little tunnel escorting us up to the plane.
Wow.
And then there were so many cool things, but when we got off the plane, or when we landed in D.C. At about 10 in the morning, they had the water cannon salute from the fire trucks over the plane as we came into the gate. And then we got off the gate, and there were probably 100 people, with flags and balloons and signs greeting us in D.C., which was a big surprise.
Yeah.
The former Air Station Traverse City commander from Traverse City, who now lives in D.C., was there to greet us, and lots of people have known him for years, so
Sure.
to see his face as one of the people greeting us was a big deal. School kids were there to shake the veterans' hands. It was just a huge, kind of a hero's welcome for these guys. They had the West Point Alumni Glee Club singing songs when we got there too. So already we're off the plane, and
will they
the
do
emotion
this for
is just
other
falling.
groups from other places in the country? Is this a program, or is this?
Yeah, no, it's a nationwide thing.
Okay.
They had groups from that we saw, I think Georgia and maybe California, somewhere else on the ground yesterday too. But just the fact that you can bring the 100 people together.
Sure.
That care about the Michigan veterans was pretty awesome. So yeah, the emotion starts flowing right away. And then we hit the World War II Memorial. We did the Lincoln Memorial, Vietnam, Korea, Air Force Memorial, Iwo Jima, all of the big ones in a very short period of time. It's a well-oiled machine. But to the Northern Michigan connection, I mean, obviously, of those 50 veterans, I'd probably say 35 or 40 of them are from the Northern Michigan area. And to your audience up in the north here, we had Dan Robinson and his dad Leonard Robinson.
Okay.
From Dan from Harbor Springs. Folks may know that name, or the family Heath Robinson, Navy SEAL that was killed 3 years ago in Afghanistan. And so I got to talk to both Dan and Leonard. Leonard, a Navy veteran from World War II, and just obviously a really emotional time for them. We pulled up to Arlington National Cemetery, and they got off the bus before the rest of us with the specific intent of going to visit Heath Robinson's grave site.
That's great.
At Arlington.
Yeah.
So it just kind of gives you chills to know we're there for a reason.
Yeah.
And obviously a local connection to that story.
Yeah, when I was in California, there was a local group that made a mobile Vietnam wall that a Vietnam
Traveling
veterans wall, yeah, that they could piece together at different locations, and this group, when they finished that, then took a trip to Washington D.C. and my editor at the time went on the trip, and he was a veteran himself, and just describing the emotions of people that had worked on this project and then went over there and got to touch the actual wall and see the names on it and everything, and it just sounded like a obviously worthwhile experience, but just an amazing experience too.
Yeah, it was one of the other cool things to see was just the energy level of these guys, many of them in their 90s.
Sure.
You kind of wonder, 12-hour bus trip and hopping around from site to site, how are we going to have the energy? Is this group going to still be awake at the end of the day? But man, it's just kind of invigorated all of them. There were several of these gentlemen walking around pushing empty wheelchairs. And when we got back to Traverse City last night, they did a presentation at the Coast Guard hangar. They did a presentation of the colors, and some of these veterans were the first to jump up at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
and
wow, I was going to say, so you guys got back from this day-long trip to DC, round-trip flight, and then you get home and everybody's ready to go for more. That's amazing.
And another great hero's welcome when we got back. There were probably 200 people at Cherry Capitol last night, and another 200 at the Coast Guard hangar to welcome them all home.
That's really cool.
And they end it with mail call, which is reminiscent of their time in the service.
Sure.
When they holler their name and hand out the mail. Every single one of them had mail, letters from local school kids. So they had something to hand out to everybody, and that
what
was
a well-orchestrated thing.
It was
That's
very well done. It was very well done. For anyone interested, it's called the Mid-Michigan Honor Flight. They're always looking for not only veterans to go on the next trip, but volunteers, they call them guardians, to escort. Everyone's paired with an escort for the day, so they take good care of them, and it's a good way to show your respect and appreciation for all they've done for us.
Yeah, well, like I said, that sounds like an awesome program.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time here on the briefing room. Craig Currier from the Petoskey News Review. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you again.
Appreciate having you.
Enjoyed it.
And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week right here on the briefing room.